And joining us now to further discuss this impeachment inquiry is David Stockman, the former director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Reagan. Great to speak with you this afternoon. You're also the author of Peak Trump, The Undrainable Swamp and the Fantasy of MAGA. David, it's becoming pretty clear that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, as well as Attorney General Bill Barr, they are increasingly implicated into this impeachment inquiry. Let's begin with Bill Barr here. It seems he's been pretty entangled with these international leaders as it pertains to the Mueller investigation. In your experience, is this the role of the AG?
Of course it's a role of the AG. There's some pretty serious allegations made as to how the entire Russiagate investigation, counterintelligence investigation of Trump campaign got started way back in 2016. It's obvious that the Ukrainians were involved in that in some way. And so therefore, I think it's totally appropriate that they're doing an investigation. But why are we weaponizing the normal procedures of government? The Democrats are basically saying that any president in his third or fourth year of his first term that wants to seek re-election is inherently suspect for any policy action he undertakes if somehow it can be construed to be beneficial to his reelection. On that basis, every president who went for a second term in the last 50 years should have been impeached. Clearly, Obama should have been 2011, and Bush should have been in 2003, and Clinton in 1995, and so forth. This is ridiculous. It's a clown show, and the dreamers, sleepwalkers on Wall Street better wake up, because where this is going is the House Dems have declared full-out war, and that Donald will be badly bloodied by this whole thing. On the other hand, the Republicans and Trump himself are going to fight back ferociously, and they're going to take Biden down. Effectively, whether they knew it or not, the House Democrats threw Biden under the bus because he and his son are so deeply implicated in the corruption and the muck in Ukraine in 2016. And what that means is that in standing tall when all this is done sometime next spring will be the Democratic nominee Elizabeth Warren charging onto the election scene in what I think will be a very difficult economy and maybe a stock market that's already crashed on the campaign platform of a wealth tax on the billionaires and 80,000 people in this country that have a net worth more than $50,000. When that becomes clear, or 50 million, I mean, when that becomes clear, they're going to have a heart attack on Wall Street. The politics of America are changing so rapidly that the easy street that they've been on for the last 10 or 15 years is over, finished, and done. We're heading into a decade of political combat, probably as bad as anything since the 1850s. And if you think that the economy can remain stable and that the Fed can solve every problem that comes along and keep this bull going, I think.
I want to go back to the intent and maybe motivation for Attorney General Bill Barr. Do you think he's working more like, say, a Rudy Giuliani, who is working in the interests of the presidents, or is he working more for the interests of the American public? What do you think?
I think it's the American public, because it is very obvious that the Ukrainians were involved in helping to dig up dirt on the Trump campaign. They obviously went after his campaign chairman and forced him to resign. That's interference in our election process if you're all that concerned about it. And it's totally appropriate that they attempt to get to the bottom of it. But on the other hand, both sides are wrong. We've got huge problems in this country. We just learned the deficit has already crossed $1 trillion and the year's not over yet.
That's right.
We're in the 11th year of a business expansion. It's going to end. We're going to have a recession soon. The deficit will balloon, when that hits to $2 trillion. We're in deep, deep doo-doo fiscally, and they're fighting over really silly things about what a president said in a phone call with the president of the Ukraine.
I want to jump in because you mentioned the big D word, deficit, and I wanted to talk to you about it, given your former position under President Reagan. How did we get to this point, given that President Trump campaigned on keeping this number down?
Oh, this has been going on for 30 years, and the great enabler is the Fed. The Fed has driven interest rates so artificially low with this massive expansion of its balance sheet, monetization of all this debt. It's been joined by all the other central banks of the world. Something like 22 trillion of debt has been monetized in the last 2 decades. And as a result of that, it's been very easy to finance the deficit. And so the politicians have gone on holiday. Both sides have become totally irresponsible. And Trump is the most irresponsible, fiscally
David,
irresponsible
President Trump
yet.
has criticized the Fed chair. No, I mean, not for this, but I mean, he's been definitely attacking Jerome Powell on Twitter for everything pretty much else, given, again, these weak manufacturing numbers. So why is it that, do you think, he has not yet gone after the Fed if, in your opinion, this has been a practice for the past 3 decades?
Well, he's gone after the Fed, and I applaud it. But, he's coming from left field when he's wanting more easy money and even lower interest rates. Last week, he said 0 interest rates. That's absurd. I mean, only a guy who spent a lifetime speculating in New York real estate on someone else's debt would think that 0 interest rates are a healthy thing or are sustainable. I'm making the opposite point. If we had had real, legitimate, market-driven, price-discovered interest rates, the cost of financing this 22 trillion debt would be 300, 400, 500 billion a year more. It would have scared the living bejesus out of the politicians, and they might have done something about entitlements. They might not have, thrown another 100 billion at the Pentagon that didn't need it. So that's the problem. The Fed has made it so easy that essentially, as I said, the politicians on both parties have gone on vacation.
David, so the Fed has cut rates twice this year. If you had the ear of Jerome Powell, what would you advise him to do going into 2020? What should his strategy be?
Well, I would advise him to quit because he's the most incompetent Fed chairman we've had yet, and there's been a long string of them. He's absolutely a coward. He won't stand up to the president. He won't stand up to Wall Street. They had a hissy fit on Christmas Eve when he was doing the right thing, trying to get rates normalized. I mean, do people realize we had a money market or Fed funds rate below the inflation rate for 10 years running? That didn't do anything for Main Street. That was just, so much fodder for Wall Street speculators. So he ought to just reverse everything he's done, get back to normalizing interest rates. They need to be far higher than they are today. And he needs to keep shrinking this bloated balance sheet, which, is basically indicative of the kind of financial fraud that's gone on for the last decade.
Well, would you say that he was put into a pretty hard place given the trade tariffs that have been, of course, implemented from the executive branch here, forcing him into this position, David?
Yeah, he's in a hard position, but that raises a great question. If one branch of government is doing something absolutely stupid, which these tariffs are, they're going to add up to something like $120 billion when they become fully effective on just the Chinese goods alone. That's just like a body blow at the American economy and at world trade. So that's stupid. But you can't expect the Federal Reserve to compensate for the stupidity of other branches of government. We have to eat the broccoli. We have to bear the consequences of the stupidity that the Congress is allowing, Trump and his lonesome sitting there in the Oval Office abusing these statutes. He's using the 1962 Trade Act and the 74 Act. None of them were ever intended to be abused in this reckless, horrendous manner. And yet he's doing it, and there's no effort at all on Capitol Hill to stop him. And then you have all these whiners on Wall Street that want him to go in and compensate for the tariff impact by making money even easier so that this totally artificial bubble can keep on bubbling. We're in very bad shape. Everybody's complicit in really a fantasy that's going to blow sky high.
All right, David, we're going to have to leave it there. That's David Stockman, former director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Reagan. He's also the author of Peak Trump, The Undrenable Swamp, and The Fantasy of MAGA on sale now.